No, even going back to this summer, I would talk to people and we would, like, be surprised, just in conversation, like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is Urban's last year. And then if you saw Urban and Shelley after the Michigan game in the tunnel, sharing a moment together, they're hugging. And it was pretty clear, like, if you really want to read into things, and, she's hugging him and saying, "You did it, we did it, you did it." And at that point, it was like, yeah, that's what it would look like if this was going to be his last time facing Michigan. And then, of course, this morning we find out that it would be. So no, nobody was really on the beat. You're not really surprised that it happened, but I think that it happened this early was maybe a surprise. 2 days after the Big Ten championship game, we thought maybe it would go maybe later in the week. But this had been the way things were leaning for a little while now.
So I was buying the version of the story that it would play out that he would come back for one other season, groom Ryan Day, and then Ryan Day would take over the following season. That's what I was buying into, and that's why this was a bit of a surprise to me, but certainly not a stunner.
Yeah, and that's kind of what threw a little hiccup in all of this is that the report came out that from, I think, Football Scoop or something, where they would, like you said, Urban would coach one more year, which went counter to other things we had been hearing. So, you weigh him, and I guess maybe he could have done it one more year. So if they lose to Michigan, he probably does it one more year. You don't want to go out with a loss to Michigan, but with everything falling the way it did, and one of the things Urban talked about on Tuesday was the program is in a good spot right now. A lot like Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley. When Bob Stoops handed it off, he liked where everything was. And so Urban felt good about doing it now. And I guess, why not, basically?
Yeah, because regardless of what he would have said between now and opening day next year, there would be large speculation, even if there was a plan in place to succeed him with Ryan Day after one more season, or even if he would have said, "Hey, I'm going to coach this football team for as long as I possibly can," considering everything that had happened health-wise and otherwise, that wouldn't necessarily have helped the recruiting situation, which he spoke to during the news conference.
Yeah, and he wanted to get this done before signing day. The early signing day is coming up in a few weeks. He didn't want to, I guess, dupe those kids into signing and then be like, no, I'm going to step down. Sorry, and didn't want to deal with that. There's, that's not great PR for the university. So there was that sped up his timeline. He said today. So you get that taken care of. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of different factors that weighed in that caused him to, I guess, push everything up. And so that's another reason why it was a little bit of a surprise that it happened this early. And then, we find the decision as to this year being the last year, next year being the last year. But I guess Ryan Day got a pretty good crash course this season on being the Ohio State head coach. So maybe that also allowed Urban Meyer to step aside and not have to give him a full year of, being the guy in waiting.
Tony, I know it's been a long day, speaking of Ryan as well, but it's been a long day. And therefore, I just want to hit you with one topic, and you can take this in whatever direction. And that's the legacy question. And for me, I hate having sports discussions and debates where just the one big number's thrown out, regardless of whether you're talking Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, greatest quarterbacks of all time. I'll use that as an example. People just throw out 5, and that's all we judge this player by, this coach by, is a championship number, especially in college football, where if you miss the playoffs in the NFL, you've got nobody to blame but yourself. If you miss the playoffs in college football, as Urban Meyer and Ohio State has the last 2 years and in 2015, yes, you can blame yourself, because if you're perfect, you're going to make it. But we know that I think the number is 15 out of the 20 that have made it have not been perfect. Therefore, you're leaving it up to a committee, and the committee has not been kind to Ohio State the last 2 years. And with that glossy record and the one national championship, man, I just look at that 7-year run and I just feel, wow, what could have been?
Yeah, even starting with 2012, when if Gene Smith had not allowed his team to go to the bowl game in 2011, Ohio State is playing Notre Dame in 2012 for a national title. And imagine Urban Meyer's first year at Ohio State, they go 12-0 or 13-0, win a national title. You'd have the Big Ten championship game in there as well, but they would have felt pretty good about that one. And, you know, he didn't lose his first Big Ten conference regular season game until his 4th year at Ohio State. And the 2015 season was his first regular season Big Ten loss. I mean, that's some Bobby Bowden ACC Florida State stuff right there. You know, when they dominated for years and years and years. We talked about his legacy on my podcast tonight. And the one thing that I didn't even mention that is probably his legacy, other than like the 7-0 against Michigan and a national title, is what he did for the Big Ten. He raised the entire Big Ten up, not to necessarily Ohio State's level, but everybody else had to raise their level. And they had to start spending their money, Northwestern with their facilities and all of these different programs bettering themselves because of a standard that he brought in. And you think back to when Jim Tressel was at Ohio State and Mark D'Antonio was at Michigan State, and there was, we're doing enough. The thought was, we're doing enough as we are, and however it ends up at the end of the season is fine. Urban Meyer comes in and he's like, his immediate target is Alabama. That's what he's looking at. And so he raises Ohio State standards. Other teams' programs raise their standards. Michigan State makes the playoffs in 2015. And all of these different programs are better off for having Urban Meyer in the Big Ten. And they may not recognize that. They may not want to admit it. But look at the level of coaches in the league now compared to when he was here or before he arrived. And, now coaches, every schools are paying their coaches. Jeff Brom, Purdue keeps Jeff Brom. Scott Frost goes to Nebraska. He's going to be a lifer there, you would think. So all of these different guys, these different coaches that have been brought in, and really before Urban Meyer arrived, that was one of the downfalls of the Big Ten, was the lack of coaches. That was what separated the SEC from everybody else. Is they had the coaches, they paid for them, they paid for the programs. Urban Meyer comes in, and obviously the Big Ten Network was a huge part of that as well. But he caused everybody to raise their standard. And you're seeing the benefits of that. You saw it last year. You see it, you see it every year where, maybe the records may not always show it, but the programs are being built up and the facilities. And now these schools can go and recruit national or where they haven't before because they have more stuff to show off. They're on national TV every week. Every Big Ten game since, practically 2007 for over a decade now is on national TV. So there is a lot to sell now, and they weren't selling it as hard before Urban Meyer arrived.
It's a great point about his influence beyond Columbus, and the influence there was pretty considerable with the Big Ten championships in 2014, 17, and 18, and of course near misses, and you could award them the 2012 in all practicality as a 4-4 conference team in Wisconsin went on and won the Big Ten championship as Ohio State at 8-0 sat home, as Tony alluded to, and that could have been a championship game that would have actually pitted them against not Alabama, against Notre Dame, who was 12-0 that season. That would have been interesting and could have completely changed the ledger on a few different two particular coaching legacies that would have evened things out a little bit more. Interesting stuff. To rewrite history is always a fun and frustrating thing, depending on your perspective.
It's more of a summer thing than a December 4th thing right now.
Yeah, we've got 40 bowl games to talk about here for the next several weeks in the playoffs, which people can't get enough of. So, Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone. It's always a great discussion, Tony. And again, I know you've had a long day, so I appreciate you jumping on to give us a different perspective on this one, and always a good one.